Hello and welcome to Let's Drone Out. This is show 237. I'm not Jack. You've probably spotted that already. I'm down here in the corner, Lee Schofield, also known as Painless 360. And tonight I am joined by a small...
Jack. You've probably spotted that already. I'm down here.
My bad.
There's always someone.
Yeah.
There's always somebody. Hopefully that's better. There was a bit of an echo. I've muted my stuff here, so hopefully you can hear me now. So we're down a couple of people. So Tony's not with us today. So Tony's taking a week off. Jack's taking a week off. So I'm afraid you're stuck with the four of us. So tonight we have Curry Kitten.
Hello.
Hello. We have Andrew/Frank.
Hello.
And we have Andy RC.
I do.
So Curry, do you want to do the disclaimer before we get into this? And then we're not going to get into trouble.
Yeah, we'd better, because we're talking about potentially inflammatory things. So any views expressed by any guests on this show are personal and may not reflect the views of the host or any participant of the show. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well done. So, yeah. So thank you for tuning in. If you're listening on the podcast, don't forget there's a whole stream available with historic LDO episodes as well. I'm covering for... the regular host, because unfortunately he's got other things on, and this is actually the third time I've kind of done the guest hosting slot. And each time when I first started this, I'll let you into a little secret, when Jack first asked me to come along and do this, I kind of wrote this little list of things that we can talk about on a bit of paper and kind of shared it between everybody. The first show we got through about a quarter of that list. Was that about right, guys? About a quarter?
Right.
About 1/4.
Yeah,
so I thought, okay, we'll come back. We'll have another crack at it. We'll speed it up. We'll get through the rest of it. And the last show, we did about another quarter. So this time, and luckily there's less of us here, so we might actually get through the rest of the list. So if you haven't listened to the other two Back to the Futures, where the first one we talked about the history of the hobby, and we looked at the last 10 years and what's gone on, and that kind of filled up the entire time, even though that was just kind of, just a bit. And then last time we talked an awful lot more about recommendations for kit, and I want to revisit that. Last time we talked a lot about Andy RC disappeared from the stream. Hopefully he'll come back in a minute. We talked about radios, our recommendations for radios, the Free Sky stuff, and then we talked about FPV goggles, and the rest of the list that I had here disappeared. So hopefully we'll get round to that. But before we get into that, just like to...
Sorry about that. Some technical issues.
That's all right.
But techno notice.
That's all right. We were carrying on regardless. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is something that's kind of been affecting a lot of YouTube channels, and it's kind of cool that we've got Curry and we've got Andy other side, because as people who make regular content, big box, little box, then what you tend to find is that you get sent lots of stuff for review. So I know I've talked to Curry, Wayne, and I've talked to Andy about this as well, is that you tend to find that it comes in quite regularly, and every couple of days you get a knock on the door and there's some new piece of technology that somebody wants to do a video on or a review. And because China has been closed since pretty much the end of January, was it really, when Chinese New Year kicked in? The flow of stuff has really stopped. I've only received one bit of technology to review, and I'll show you what that is. A bit of a preview of a video that's coming. This is the Holybro Cinewhoop. This has got the, thank you, Andy. This has got the DJI HD stuff in it. It's quite a surprise. I thought this was a normal Cinewhoop style thing, so it would fit on the palm of my hand, and it arrived in a bloody great big box, and I kind of was surprised. But literally, this is the only thing that I've had in for review in probably 5 weeks. And one of the really nice things about it is that normally you're always running to, do your reviews and stuff. And I found it really liberating that in the past 5 or 6 weeks, I've been able to do videos on lots of how-tos, tips, tricks, builds, loads of things that were on my list that I wanted to do videos about, but that I couldn't get anywhere near. I just wondered, Wayne, if you would kind of found the same thing, if you'd have the same impact over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I went on holiday in, when was it? Sometime, and when I came back, it was just going into Chinese New Year, and that's when they had the corona virus sort of broke out in China, and everything shut down. So I don't think I've had anything literally since January coming through new. It's never really been much of a thought for me, because I've always had more ideas than I've ever had time to do. I have a whiteboard over there, and I scribble things down when I have ideas, and I still haven't got through all of them. So I've managed to do some builds, because I'm a really slow, lazy builder. I'm such a procrastinator when it comes to sort of getting the soldering stuff out and getting stuff. So I've managed to do builds. I haven't managed to fly them because it's been so bad. I've been working on my sim. I've had plenty more time to do that, and I've still got little projects dotted all around the incredible mess in my office that I've got stuff to do with. So for me, it's been an interesting little break, because when you do get stuff in, something that people perhaps that don't do this don't realize is that they sort of look at it and like, oh, amazing, you're getting all this free stuff. But I mean, for myself, and I'm sure you and Andy as well, feel a great deal of responsibility when somebody sends you something that you want to get your opinion out and get a good video together that covers everything, and that takes an awful lot of time. And when you've got a little pile sat next to you and you're like, oh, I have to build something of that, I have to go and fly that, I have to check this out, and you need to spend a lot of time, it's quite a lot of pressure as well. So it's been an interesting couple of months just doing other stuff and having I feel a little bit more chilled out about it.
That's really interesting. Andy, what about you?
Well, for me, I get sent so much stuff that I ended up with quite a backlog, because I'm not one of these people to, spend 30 minutes with a product and then put a video out and say, this is the best thing in the world, or don't get it, because I don't believe that, I don't think you could ever do a product justice by just spending one day with it. It's not having a go at other people. It's just that I did almost manage it for a while, and I was like, it's not fun, I wasn't finding it fun. So taking my time, and then I also thought as well, this could be somebody's only product or quad or transmitter or whatever like that. And if I'm putting out a video every single day, then there's no way that I could catch it like a showstopper that I'll go, wait a minute, you shouldn't get this thing. So for me, I still haven't got through even that up to now. Still, I'm not through that backlog, because now when I make a video, I mean, maybe I'm spending too much time on it, but just recently, actually, the shortest amount of time it took for me to make a video was 4 days, and that was the Emacs Tiny Hawk race. It turned up 4 days before the date where they say this. They have a very unique way of doing stuff, as I'm sure Wayne knows. They have an embargo on their things that they release, and I didn't even know I was getting this damn thing, but I opened the package and it said Emacs on the side. I was like, oh no. And so the first thing I did was rush to the computer and say, when has this got to be out by? And they said in 3 days time, or something like that, 3 or 4 days time. I was like, oh my God. So it was like drop everything that I was doing. And so and for me that was a push. So I put a lot of time into the videos, and so I still got a backlog of stuff, although just like you were saying, people I've got a backlog of stuff, but at the same time it's kind of pointless posting videos about it because people can't buy the stuff anyways. So it's not that I'm posting the videos you know, because I want people to buy them. But it would be frustrating if I was to say, look at this thing, it's great, and then you can't buy it. You know? So yeah, it's been a real difficult one for me, because I'm like, I could clear this backlog of stuff, but on the other hand, you can't buy it anyways because they're either not in stock, or China's not even there and you can't buy it. So, but I did some cool stuff though. I did my 1S balance lead thing. That was quite popular, and it's something that I've sort of always had an idea for, but never had time to get around to doing. I'm doing a lot of stuff with RC cars and land-based stuff, so I had a little bit of time to do that as well. So that's what I've been up to.
Good, because I've heard of a couple of businesses going pop because they're quite relatively small, not particularly cash rich, and the lack of products for them to sell. They've just run out of money and had to close up shop. I was talking to people like ZOHD and Fat and all those kind of guys, TBS and others are all kind of getting on with it, because China seems to be gradually opening up, because they seem to be luckily on the other side of the coronavirus thing. But it's been fascinating for me to really see how important China is, and China manufacturing, distribution, shipping, etc. is the hobby, because it's just stopped all the new stuff coming out, even the stuff that I was expecting to be released in February, and now it's all slipped kind of 6-8 weeks minimum. So even I was even chasing Fat Shark about something that should have been out now, and it was quite funny because Greg at Fat Shark was like, "Oh, I need to chase them about that. Thanks for the reminder." But it's still not around. And again, just a note there from I missed that one. Who was that from? But
that was Mr. Shady.
Yeah, Mr. Shady talking about the fact he's ordering the modular, but things are getting cancelled and stuff. So you're right. I think it's tricky because if you've had a product for a while, and you put it up there, if somebody orders it, they may or may not get it. The order may or may not be cancelled. But I'm like Curry. I've got a big list of things that when you're answering comments and you're replying to stuff on YouTube, because I know we all do it.
Gives you an idea.
Yeah, and sometimes if you're really busy, you can. And this is my issue, that sometimes you're so busy because you've got this pile of stuff that you have to get through, and other things that you've committed to or you've been asked to do, that you kind of go and you go and you just give the answer, and then you move on to the next comment. And it's been lovely to have the time to actually think, hang on a minute, that's a really good question. Because I think it was Wayne, was it you and I talking about electrical ohms, volts, and when we were talking,
I was actually saying, I was describing Tony and his ineptitude with electronics, and you said, that gives me a brilliant idea for a video. I should talk about the basics. So
I've got a basic bit. Yeah, hello to Tony. But the idea is that there's lots of people don't understand the difference between voltage, current, and resistance, and how they're all related, and what voltage actually is and how current works. And from when I used to kind of teach that stuff, I use the analogy of a water-based system. So voltage is like the water pressure, water current is like the electrical current. And I thought, you know what, that would make a really good video. So there's been loads of those things. So a lot of the videos that are coming out at the moment are more how-tos and the stuff that I've been meaning to get to for ages. So every time I read one of those comments where somebody asks a really good question, or it's a question that I did a video for 7 or 8 years ago, I probably wouldn't want anyone watching now because it's probably horrific. Do you guys ever do that? Go back and watch some of your old stuff, and you sit there kind of like that?
I'm a bit like same with music. Once video's done, it's done. Moved on to the next one.
Yeah. Occasionally, I'll do that thing though, where I'll build a model with a specific flight controller, and I won't do it again for 8 months. And then and you do that thing where you go, oh, hang on a minute, let me just have a look and remind myself how I do that. And you're watching it back, and you go, could have done that better. Ooh, that's not very good. Doing that, yeah. So we've all been, but to finish my rambly comment, answering a comment like that. So there was a one from today about another question, and it was like, actually, that's a really, really great question. Because I know if somebody's asked me on a video, it won't be that one individual who's struggling to find the answer or isn't sure about what it works. There could be 10, 100, 1,000 people who have that same question that, you know, the video would be answered for. So yeah, I was just interested in what you guys had found, because it's been a very dry patch. It's opening up now. I'm starting to get new things shipped across, but it's actually been really nice not to, you know, be running. I don't watch a lot of the guys who just do product reviews. Have any of you been looking at some of those other channels? How they coped?
Well, you can really tell. I think. I'd be careful here. I've not done the disclaimer yet, have you?
Yeah, we have
the disclaimer.
Yeah.
You're covered.
We have done the disclaimer.
Have we done the disclaimer?
Yeah, at the start.
Oh,
Yeah,
Done that one.
you noticed the lack of content where it was sort of daily basis from some people, and I noticed Stuart UAV Futures was branching out into sort of talking about what's coming in Betaflight and a few other little bits, which is a bit of a departure for him, certainly.
yeah.
I have to admit I haven't been watching them. I just noticed the titles coming up. But
without,
normally,
without naming names, oh sorry.
No, I was just going to say. Normally, when I was clicking on like my subscriptions for YouTube, I get sort of a page full of this is what's happening, and that is so far down. It's like I remember refreshing the page this morning. It was like one extra video from something else, whereas normally you'd expect a whole bunch of things coming up. So it's certainly made an impact on people who make videos just generally.
Yeah, I think it has. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes the amount of content that gets kicked out. I mean, because the cool thing about I love about Andy's video, I've got to figure out which way the camera's pointing. Andy's videos is because Andy, both of you, well, all three of us actually, we don't tend to get something in and have it for 2 minutes and go, it's the best thing ever with every single product. You tend to there's a balance of, well, this is good, but this is a bit meh. And we try, you know, and if we are trying to, or be under pressure, I know I call my videos first look rather than a review. If I
think first looks are okay. It's just that
I think if you're up front and you say it's a first look rather than it's a review, then I think that's fair comment, because it's amazing. Like the EV300Ds, you know, when they first came out, you know, doing a kind of a first look video, they look great, but it's only when you start to play with them out in the field and flying fast, you think, oh, hang on a minute. And then the lag issues started to, you know, people started to spot that. You're welcome, Mr. Shady. So actually, that's a great example. You know, going back to that thing about the comment, somebody asked me a comment. Mr. Shady asked about, can you have the sound files that you get on a radio, Free Sky Radio, in Companion? And I was just going to go, oh yeah, you just go here, you type, and I think, actually, no, it's a video. So I did a video and then pointed it to him, and that's a great example of the stuff I was talking about.
One of the things. Oh, sorry, Andy. I was just going to say, one of the things I get asked almost continuously, and it makes me think I must do a video about, is, can I have the sound files? These are the strange sounds from my Tyrannus of my daughter when she was about 6, which all the inflections of everything is completely different and sounds a bit like the Red Queen from Resident Evil. People ask that so much because they don't appreciate that you can record your own sounds and put them on there. So I must, it's on the board as a to-do, but it's like, show video about how easy it is to record stuff and replace your entire sound file if you want to.
And also underneath that, report people asking for the files of your 6-year-old daughter.
People just assume it's a download somewhere. Where'd you get this?
I see what you mean.
Yeah. Like Amber Pack, small, young child pack, or whatever.
Yeah, be careful with searching that.
Yeah.
No, what I was going to say, ironically though, Lee, about what really annoyed me about the EV300Ds is I spent probably the best part of 2 weeks with the EV300Ds. And it turns out that, you know, because they were pre-prod, a few are, you got yours and did your latency test. I had no latency problems with mine whatsoever, and this is something that so to be fair, I did say, look, these are a production version, and mine were completely different than when people bought them. Mine had RPSMA antenna things.
Right, yeah.
I received them like ages before they got released. And I was doing like crazy freestyle, and there's like no way that I had any latency issues whatsoever. I believe they've been fixed now, anyways, with a firmware update or something. But Ishin's a bad example because they are not consistent with their products. So I was annoyed about that one because all of my comments were, "Why didn't you talk about the latency?" And I was like, "Mine didn't have any latency issues, but yours obviously did. They're different. They had a different firmware on them."
Yeah, and actually that is one of the issues, isn't it? Was sometimes getting the pre-prod units that you do a review and the actual production. I mean, look at what happened with the Fat Shark HDOs. You know, my pre-production unit was amazing. You got yours, and it had light leaks, and they had to fix that. So that's the other danger that and sometimes we're not told as reviewers that they are pre-prod, even though I always ask. You know, they go, no, that's it. There's no changes. That's a production version.
Well, it might also be in the actual production process. You know, as far as the designers are concerned, it might be exactly the same thing, because that's not too uncommon that you go to a manufacturer and say, I want, a small batch, the pre-production run but you get it, it's all good. So you say, yes, I want more of those, please. And you get those. And without any notice at all, it's completely different from what you've previously had, even though you've just said, I want more of those things. And that is kind of a thing you have to deal with when dealing with these kinds of manufacturers.
What annoyed me about the EV300Ds, though, is that even though I'd said in my video it was a pre-prod, luckily that time, what's that say? Just taking a...
But for those
Emma must be the one that sounds like she's trying to have sex with you all the time. It's the seduction voice pack, I call it.
Yeah, it is. So for those listening on the podcast, the reason why we've just all laughed is Clive FPV commented that his wife has made him take the amber voice pack off his radio because it sounds too raunchy. Yeah. So we've just made us all laugh. Clive, that's brilliant. Thanks, mate.
He keeps crashing when he's flying because he's pressing certain buttons.
Yeah. So Andrew, go on. You were just saying about the pre-production stuff.
Yeah, what annoyed me about that one is I mentioned it. They actually told me, what you've got is like one of the first sets. It's pre-prod. So I mentioned all of this in the video. I think I even said it's kind of hard to review a product when you know it's pre-prod. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. And I got comment after comment. What about the latency? What about the latency? And I'm like, did you not watch the video? It's a pre-prod thing, I think, and then everyone's assuming that just because the production version's got latency, that my pre-prod one must have had but if you go and look at Wayne mentioned UAV Futures, actually, he did his review and didn't seem to suffer any latency either. So I imagine he must have. You'd notice. I mean, what did you say it was, Lee? 100 milliseconds or something like that.
It was over 120 milliseconds.
There is no way I would be able to fly. Especially, I mean, I was diving down the middle of trees. You cannot do that with 100 milli. You can't do that with 60 milliseconds. But people were still. So, anyways. We'll move off that topic, but it's a bitter one for me.
It's interesting what Frank said, though, because I don't generally get pre-prod stuff, but I've had plenty of times when I've put a review out and then people were saying, I've got mine and the motors are different or the props have changed or something. And as Frank said, it's not necessarily... Because I figured maybe they just changed it halfway and didn't tell anybody, but it could be that it was like an early production run, and when they ordered the next production run, different things came along with it for whatever reason.
Well, the weird thing is just to go back to kind of ram home this point, the whole Fat Shark HDO thing was, Andy, you bought them and then came round to my house and we were sat in my back garden because you said this is not the same. So you tried mine on, and you tried your HDOs, and I luckily I know Greg at Fat Shark, so we pinged Greg at Fat Shark and went, Greg, there's a problem, and Greg was, is there? So actually, we took photos. Do you remember this, Andy? We sat in the garden taking. So I was taking photos on my phone and pinging them to him. So we went to and what it turned out was the factory had decided to change the plastics on the side doors without asking Fat Shark, and had just arbitrarily, probably because it was tuppence cheaper, had changed the plastics, and they weren't optically opaque. So they were bleeding light through. So then, there was a whole hoo-ha about that stuff. So sometimes it's not even the manufacturer, it's not the vendor, it's the manufacturer making decisions and swapping parts out without actually letting people know. It is a little bit like the Wild West for some stuff. But I'm just conscious that Andrew/Frank has only said about 50 words in the 25 minutes of the show. So let's move on to the next topic, because I want to speak to Andrew/Frank, and it does feel weird calling you that on this show, because I call you Andrew in real life. Can we talk a little bit about the mini air show update? Because I'm still not sure whether I'm booking a hotel. So just for everybody listening, the mini air show has been something that Andrew/Frank, still weird, has been organizing for the last 4 or 5 years. Based down just outside of Winchester. It's been a great place with the minimum amount of oversight for everybody in the hobby, all aspects, wings, quads, indoor, outdoor, people who are interested, who just want to go along, people who just want to kind of come down and meet all the people who are there. It's been a really great welcoming place, and it's changed a little bit this year. And last time we spoke about it, just to provide a bit of context, it turned out that the way it was being organized this time meant that Frank actually wasn't involved, and that potentially meant that the whole way the show that we've all loved wasn't going to be the same. Now, that last time we spoke was about what, 3 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago,
something
Andrew?
like that.
So what's the latest?
So the tickets are up on the Popham Airfield Eventbrite page. So if you either go to Popham Airfield's page, or you can go through, you can still find it through going facebook.com/mini air show, and then finding the MO6 event, and then there's the links for the tickets there. So if you wanted to get tickets, that is the way you can get tickets. So they are live. I'm still waiting for a bit more explanation on exactly what the different tickets mean. I'm not entirely clear myself. So as soon as I know what's going on there, then I will pass that on. But there will at least be, so there's a bunch of teams that are lined up to do some flying, some like displays on the kind of main flight line. It's going to be basically the same layout as last year. So there have been plans to use one of the manned runways and make it a much bigger event, but that's been scaled back, I think, kind of with everything else. Big events are maybe not going to be going too well this year, and this is kind of a way to mitigate some of the risk there. So it's going to be basically the same layout as last year, with the model airfield, the FPV racetrack, and the marquee in between. So on the racetrack, there's going to be, I believe KQRC are running the FPV racing, and that's kind of being organized by them. The main flight line is being organized by the Southern Area BMFA, and they're doing that side of things. And so there's going to be, sort of scale models and that kind of thing. I don't know if there's going to be an FPV slot on the main flight line. I don't know how it's going to work out with the evening flying, how that's all working out. So I've asked those questions, but I haven't heard back yet. So I'm still waiting on the details there. But in the marquee, there will be the Team Mini Airshow volunteers doing a lot more building simulators, all that kind of stuff. We will be putting that on in the marquee. We've worked out where to get hold of some kits, hopefully. So we'll be putting some stuff together. So if you wanted to come along and scratch build some stuff in the marquee, come and join us there.
Fab. That all sounds a lot more positive than last time we spoke, because last time it was you needed a BMFA certificate and there was all that goodness. So have they kind of retreated from that position a little bit? Because it sounds more like the show that we know and love.
Yeah, it seems a lot more that way. But I'm still, because I think they're still working out. I think they're still drawing short straws for who has to be flight director and kind of nominate who has to do what. So all the kind of the schedule has been sorted and the layout's been sorted and the tickets are live and everything like that. So there's definitely an event happening. But
but I hate to be the person to step in and say this, but I'm not gonna say the word, but has the C word, not the normal C word that we like to say.
In worse trouble now.
Has the C word ever been brought up? Because just conscious that, April, there are events in April getting cancelled or have already been cancelled because of the C. And the reason why I say C word is there's a particular word that if you say at the moment online, you will. There'll be consequences if you say it on YouTube, believe it or not. So
we've said it once already. It's fine. Coronavirus. We don't know. Who knows?
Oh, I tried.
That's it, yeah. You did. You did very well.
Than C word to me, I have to say.
That was almost as fancy verbal footwork as when you were trying to describe that system of stretching an image without mentioning the name. That was very good, Andy. Well done.
You mean dynamically stretching video? That's what.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah,
that's what it's called, isn't it?
That it is. There's no brand names involved in it. So just to finish, Andrew/Frank. So basically, you're still not involved in it. We're still not clear on what's going on, but it appears to be going in the right direction. But in April, as Andy RC quite rightly pointed out, there may be an impact if there's additional things happening in the UK because of the virus.
So yeah, we may be scratch building like some masks, and I think Fraser's got some plans for an oxygen generator. So we'll have that going on in the corner.
Right. You just have to hand out kind of like rubber gloves and surgical masks. It'd just be like a regular evening at Tony's.
Like a wingspan apart from each other. It's fine.
Regular evening at Tony's. Jack would have been the better person to. He's got his special drawer, Auntie, bless him. Let's not go there.
No, let's not go there. No,
you don't want to go there.
Not really. So cool. Okay, so keep us up to date. We'll put a link in the description if you want to go and have a look at the tickets for that. And hopefully, there'll be more updates to come. But thanks, Andrew, kind of covering that for us. So next one to talk about then, and I know this is something that Andy RC that you're quite interested in. Since last time I was on, there's been an awful lot of stuff happening in the States around the reaction and a coordinated response to all the proposed legislation and remote ID and all that stuff. I know that's something that you wanted to talk about. What's your thoughts on what's been happening over the last 4 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been done, hasn't it? But I'm not sure what the impact has been. Maybe people in the chat are more up on what the actual result of it was, but obviously there was a protest that happened, and I believe quite a lot of people turned up. Actually, I think people were worried that only 20 people would turn up at this FAA protest, but I think quite a lot of people turned up. Some of the signs made me laugh because I saw one sign that said "God loves drones." Which I don't. If you're not familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church, who hold picket signs, there's say something a bit similar to that, but slightly more offensive.
Well, at the risk of being controversial, I know speaking to Jack at the end of last week, Jack has decided that what we need to do is actually start a church.
Yeah,
and then claim kind of religious freedom. In which case, that they can't do anything about it, and it just needs to be a global church, and it has to be the Church of RC or the Church of Drone. So that was his idea, and I think it's got merit. We might have to make badges.
Oh yeah, we
actually sorted out. Yeah, we elected a god last week.
Yeah.
I missed that. Who was that?
Well, I said it should have been you, Lee. Before,
Oh,
before
I'm not.
We said you were a disciple, and God was Sharpie.
that was it. Yeah.
Okay.
No, well,
I think we decided to make Lee an apostle, didn't we? Just to up him a bit.
I said it should. I said if Sharpoo's going to be God, then Lee has got to be Jesus or something at least. You know.
Right. Yeah. Apologies to everyone out there who is deeply religious, who are just about to spit their cornflakes at the radio. But going back to the point, I know there was things about like Get FPV have been doing things and kind of like, you know, hiring lawyers and stuff. But I read online that the number of petitions and things wasn't particularly big in terms of the online stuff that people were signing.
I think it was the number of comments was the problem, wasn't it? Yeah, because there were the proposals and then you could comment on it, and I think they didn't get the number of comments that they wanted. But I believe the FAA protest, from what I saw and have read on the internet, people thought it was successful. I mean, you know, how much of an impact it has, I don't know. One thing that's happening for sure is that race day quads are taking the FAA to court for a legal battle, and I think that's probably got more weight behind it. You know, that I think there's a GoFundMe. I haven't got a link to it, but I'm pretty sure there's a GoFundMe. They're pledging their own money to pay for it, and
because Tyler sent out an email, didn't he, which kind of detailed all that stuff.
That's it.
Yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago. I was really impressed with that, because I know Race Day Quad sometimes comes in for a bit of grief about Rotor Riot and the other things that they're involved with, but actually, you know, good on them, because if it gets picked up by the media and the media start looking into it and it gives a platform for the other side of the argument, then that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Also,
I haven't looked in detail, but the US is so litigious that you often find cases that people are taking the government to court and winning, and they're taking it all the way up to the Supreme Court because there's some amendment in the Bill of Rights that they decide it's oppressing against or something like that, and it's quite often people manage to get things overturned on small technicalities like that. So I think it's got more legs than signatures, I think.
I think what surprised some people is that I think Amazon actually. I mean, I don't know if this was just them covering their back or whatever. I believe Amazon protests remote ID, and I know DJI certainly does as well.
Sorry, Andrew, is it worthwhile us talking about what remote ID is? Because I'm conscious that a lot of people have kind of read lots of things about it. And do you know what it actually is?
Who's that addressed to?
Sorry, Andy RC. Sorry, there's too many Andys. Andrew/Frank.
I mean, Andrew/Frank probably knows more about it than me, but essentially, remote ID is it is what it says that you have to. I mean, there's so many rules. It's ridiculous. It's about sort of having a beacon on your models that can be tracked by online, and I think is there the exemption that it's like if you're at an AMA field or something like that, or there are designated clubs or fields are they called fleurs or I mean, I'm butchering this, aren't I? Andy, can you explain this better than I can? But I know that I think that is what the deal is, basically. An electronic tag on every drone that isn't in a designated field, which obviously for park flyers and kids and stuff like that,
That's interesting, because in the UK, light aircraft...
Freer, that's it. Freer,
right.
Sorry.
Light aircraft in the UK don't have to have that kind of system on board. It's actually a higher standard for something that weighs 300 grams than something that's got two people on board and weighs a quarter of a ton. It does seem a slightly disproportionate thing. Andrew / Frank, do you know any more about that from the stuff that you've been involved in here in the UK?
So I know there was talk about bringing that in the UK, and they looked at it and went, "We've got too much to deal with at the moment. We'll put that off for another few years. We'll get on with what we're doing at the moment, and we'll come back to that later. Maybe someone else will have thought about it a bit more by that point." But I think, looking around, there's the way that the FAA have proposed is by, like Andy said, by having kind of servers somewhere back, that are run by different companies, and you sign up with one of them, and your drone reports back to those, so that anyone going around can look it up on an app or website or whatever and find out who you are and where you're flying and all, where you are standing while you're flying and all this kind of stuff. But I think the proposal in France, which I think is actually coming into effect at the end of this year, but don't quote me on this, but there's a lot of stuff going on in France. I think it was written into the law in France at the end of last year at least, but they're looking at saying it can be either that, or it can be so just broadcast from the drone itself, so not necessarily going back to a server somewhere, but just being broadcast from the drone.
Because that's how ADSB works, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's how ADSB works. It's how
yeah.
the DJI stuff works with the aeroscope. So that's kind of a bit more of a accepted standard, but I think not as many people can make as much money out of it. So maybe that's why the FAA wants to go this other route of running servers to do it all the time.
What an outrageous comment that somebody might be doing something because it'll make more money for somebody else. I can't believe you said that.
That's why it was interesting about these companies who are being blamed. This is why people say, "Oh, it's Amazon," and then Amazon turn around and say, "Oh no, we don't want this." It's like
on their own drones track, do they? What I found interesting and what I thought might stand up in a legal case is some of the banners people were holding were basically saying, "Let us fly on our own property," because of course that would effectively make it illegal to fly on your own property unless you have one of these things fitted. And these are your own property where you can like fire guns and do stuff like that, but you can't fly a 300-gram drone without getting in trouble unless you've got something attached, which I thought might be the sort of interesting legal precedents I don't know about, but it seems like you could certainly argue that must go against the spirit of something somewhere on that big list of freedoms they're so keen on in the US.
There's got to be an amendment that covers that somewhere, right? Surely.
Yeah, you're free to do what you like on your own land, basically. I think it should be there anyway. We hope so. We hope common sense prevails somehow.
Yes, let's keep our fingers crossed, because I'm still hoping that here in the UK that they realise it's just a complete waste of bloody time and eventually give up on the whole daft idea of registration, and then it goes the way of dog licenses. But we live in hope.
Yeah. Oh, going back to something that you said earlier, though, about they're a small unmanned light aircraft, and they don't have to have anything. They can essentially just fly. I read a reason why that is, and it unfortunately sort of was justifiable. Have we talked about this before, Andy, on the show? We probably have.
No, I just read Fraser's comment. That was all.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
I think we have, and it's the fact that the pilot is putting their own life in jeopardy.
Yeah,
so there is an element of responsibility they have to have.
Yeah.
Although seeing some videos on YouTube of microlight and paragliding, I'm not necessarily sure that
it's not just that though. It's the fact that if a manned aviation, if they do something silly or if they crash, they will usually find the person who's responsible for it. The problem with the drone is that the person who's responsible for when all of these light aircraft start being hit by drones and falling out of the sky, that they can't find the person who's responsible.
So what do they do? Is it in the radio? Then they kind of wire it up, so in the event of a nasty crash, it kind of electrically shocks the operator and calls 911.
You've got to handcuff yourself to the radio.
But you wouldn't be able to let go. You'd be like that. And then, calls for the paramedic.
It works like a taser and just fires like the little
the prongs into your
paper.
chest. Yeah. We'd all have really thick jackets on. It'll be that's the answer. There we go. We fixed it.
Because the other kind of distinction that's often made when people are kind of talking about this stuff about from a manned aviation perspective and kind of why are there more regulations on unmanned aircraft is the principal safety kind of idea in the air is see and avoid. And that's a lot harder when something is small and thin and black rather than a great big, parachute or something.
I missed a trick for today. We should have pulled up the latest AirProx report, shouldn't we, Andrew / Frank? And
we'll have to do that at some point.
We need to do next time I'm on. Remind me, we will do that because I love having a good laugh at those. I was at the pub talking to a pilot today about those things, and it just makes me laugh. 10, 15 years ago, anything that was weird seen at altitude was reported as some kind of UFO or a weird set of lights or whatever. Everything that they see that they don't understand is immediately reported as a UAV, even if it's a UAV that physically can't exist. It's a drone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But just kind of relevant to that, because there's also been a lot of news recently about Grant Shapps made the announcement that the CAA or the UK generally won't be aligning itself with the EASA after the end of this year. Kind of the general assumption has been that the UK would stick along with EASA because it's still next door. Grant Shapps has said, no, we're not going to follow EASA, but I don't expect that to change anything because effectively it's the same people who've been part of the CAA writing the rules for EASA are going to be writing the rules for CAA, and it's still going to be the same situation. It's not going to change any of the context or the research that they're working from. So you can ignore it all. It's not going to change anything.
Speaking of ignoring things, there's some comments going on between Mr. Shady, Fraser, and a couple of others about the exemption that has been extended. I think it is worthwhile covering that because there is an awful lot of confusion. People don't understand it. People think they can and can't do stuff. Sorry to kind of actually do this because it wasn't kind of in the plan, but Andrew / Frank, can you just very briefly explain what the situation is? So let's assume that the pilots we're talking about have their A certificate or certificate of competency through BMFA, FBV UK or others, and but haven't registered yet with the CAA, but they're a member of one of those approved large organizations. What do they have to do between now and, is it the end of June?
It is, yes. The end of June is when all of the new rules are now coming in. So
watch this space because it's changing all the time.
So they've pushed back so there was an exemption so that you could fly above 250 grams without registering with the CAA or getting an operator ID or any of that stuff. That's been pushed back now till July. So as long as you've got your membership details and the exemption, and you print those off and keep them in your back pocket or in your transmitter case or whatever, you're good until July.
But you've also got to have your certificate as well, don't you? Or is it just those two things?
Good point. I can't remember off the top of my head, but might as well put that in there. Why not? And while you're printing things, better safe than sorry, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because Sod's Law says. But so what it actually means, just for those of us in the UK, if you are already a member of one of the large model associations, you've done your competency, then that is all you have to do. You don't have to pay your £9. You don't have to sign up. Checking with them, I actually check with them. You don't have to put if you've already registered, you don't get your £9 back. Thanks very much for that.
Yeah, cheers for that.
Cheers for that. Tosses. And the other thing is that you don't also, if you have been issued with an operator ID, you don't have to put that operator ID, I understand, on your model until the exemption runs out. One other quick question. I did have a really good question from somebody at a club the other day, which is if I've got an operator ID and my mate's got an operator ID and we're at the club and I'm going to fly his plane, what do we do? Do I take his number? Do I take his number sticker off? Do I put mine on? And by the sound of it, and again, don't quote me on this, but Simon, the guy in charge of FPV UK, was very generous and kind of answered my kind of wacky question. It basically boils down to common sense. If you're just having a quick buzz around the field with a mate's plane, you're both aware of that, and you're both in the same place, and you know who's flying. Then it sounded like it's perfectly fine for that little flight for you not to change over everything. But if you were going to lend a model or a plane to a pal who's going to have it for a couple of weeks and fly it when you're not around, it probably makes sense for you to remove your operator ID and have them put theirs on it. So it's kind of common sense, really. It's not like whenever you hand over the sticks for your mate to have a go, you have to say, hang on a minute, I've got to land it. And then carefully, scrape off their operator ID and put your own sticker on it. It's not quite that draconian, but you've got to remember that if something happens and that model goes down, the person they're going to contact about that is the one whose operator ID is on the model. So just be aware of that and kind of use common sense.
That's an interesting one from Richard. He says, I've got the PDF on my phone. Is that good enough? I would have thought so.
Yeah,
I would have thought so.
Just if your phone dies, then but
I actually have them printed out and laminated in the back of my flight bag with the FPV UK insurance and the exemption. Just more because if I am flying in an area and someone comes up to me and goes, "You can't do that, it's illegal," because that's the voice they use, then I can pull the piece of paper out and go, actually, I'm flying under exemption, blah, 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 quote a load of technology numbers and bits and pieces, and they'll just hopefully be baffled and just sod off. So I tend to have them printed out so that, it's also something that I could show to anybody who wants to, argue the toss or is interested in what I'm doing.
I think if you reprint your, at least for FPV UK, if you reprint your insurance document, it will print out who you are and what certification you've passed as well. So you've got it all in one document there. Then you just have to have the exemption as well.
Great. Yeah, Jason, it's not my laminator, it's my wife's. She's a teacher. Okay, so we've got 8 minutes left, and oh my God, we still not got back to this. Did Back to the Future have a fourth bit?
It should do.
I had a video game.
Can you count Hot Tub Time Machine? Let's call it that one.
Yeah, definitely Hot Tub Time Machine. Yeah, it's not canon, but we all know it's the same universe.
Yeah.
So last time, let's get back to some of the recommended kit. We talked about radios. We talked about the fact that Free Sky used to be the one that we'd all recommend, but now we're all a bit about the way that they've been executing with the radios and OpenTX and some of the closed methodology they've been doing. We talked about goggles and came to the conclusion that there's loads of different choice. Fat Shark is a really good choice. There were loads of others, and that it really was what would fit on your face, and because it was a very kind of subjective decision. The thing we were lamenting about, if you remember, is the fact there isn't anywhere you can really go and try them out, because. So, I've had goggles here that don't fit very well and the IPD adjustment isn't fantastic. I'm sure other people have had the. I mean, I've got the DJI HD stuff here, and the fit is terrible. You must have to have a face that's shaped like a breeze block in order for the default foam to fit. But it's a bit of a shame when you spend £500 on a set of goggles, put them on, you go, oh my God, that's really horrible. So we've done those two things. What about some of the other stuff? So some of the things because I know, Andy RC, you've done a lot of the little indoor toothpick stuff. That's one of the things. If you had to choose your top 2 or 3 for that for people, what would be on your list?
So are we talking for sort of beginners or just so?
I think that's a great way. I think that's a great way to do it. Is it the beginner, the intermediate, and the advanced kind of pilot? Because the thing is, a lot of people, it's a great question you're asking, because a lot of people, when they get asked what should I buy, will give the answer based on what we would, having flown them for 5 or 6 years.
Exactly.
But that's not the same model that if it's the first proper one. So yeah, whichever way works for you. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we covered like the direction before, didn't we? Where I said there's 2 directions. You can go the simulator route, which I think is probably the best, because you can crash over and over again, and then you can buy your model. But one of my favorite like sort of line of models is the Emacs Tiny Hawk. They're really reliable. The Mobulus 6. I'm actually because I received mine so late, because they were just that popular. This thing is just it's a game changer. It's brilliant. So but yeah, somebody commented earlier, I can't remember who it was, but they said ordered the Mobula 6, but it's not
the order cancelled. Yeah,
I think that's a really bad thing to do, because what's happened, you have to remember, our sector of the hobby is very small, and financially it has impacted the hobby greatly, and hobby companies, and so they're behind, right? So if you have got an order and you're cancelling it, thinking that I'll just wait until they're in stock, if you cancel their order, your orders, then they're going to stop making them. So I would say, don't cancel your orders. Be patient and wait, because if we could end up in a situation where I know for a fact that just talking to retailers and individual companies, as I'm sure you all do, there are some people that may have to shut up shop because the waiting time is so long, but that's because they haven't been making them, and it takes time to make this stuff. So I would say, be careful canceling orders just because it's going to take this amount of time. Yeah. It's going to take that amount of time for it to reach the UK, because everything comes from China.
Yeah, no, Mr. Shady's just qualified that, and it was a 2-day processing when he ordered it, and then as soon as he'd ordered it, they upped it to 32 days, which is why he's cancelled it. And I guess that kind of makes sense.
I had that same issue with the replacement base plate I ordered for the Tyro 79. It says, "Oh yes, we'll get this to you next week," and I was like, "I don't think you will, but I'll try it." And then ordered it, and it immediately said, "This will take a couple of months." Yeah. I'm like, "Okay, I'll wait."
So, Curry, what about you for indoor flyers? Have you got any ones that have kind of impressed you? Things like the Mobula and the Tiny Hawk?
Almost exactly the same as Andy. In my written down stuff, I've written down the Emacs Tiny Hawk, certainly for a beginner. And I've only had the original Tiny Hawk. I haven't looked at the 2 or the other one. I think Emacs do such a good job on their tune that immediately I could pick it up and I could just let loose with it. And so I think that's quite friendly for a beginner point of view. If you want to go and really rip and you're a little bit more experienced, I think that's where stuff like the Mobula comes in. And what's that Beach FPV one that I can't remember, which is, it feels almost the same as the Mobula. Again, very high.
Are you talking Mobula 7? Are you talking
the Mobula 6 I'm talking about for indoors.
What for a more experienced person? You choose. See, I would say they're pretty even Stevens when it comes to the like from a beginner's standpoint.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Because I would agree
quite a handful. Yeah.
If you look at the settings in Betaflight, the amount of expo and stuff that's in Betaflight, if you look on both of them, the way it's set up and tuned for Emacs by default is a much softer, more forgiving setup than is for me personally. The Mobula 6 is just, it's fly it like you stole it territory, whereas the Emacs is a lovely, relaxing flight. You can make them both fly the same by tweaking, but I know and again, we might be in territory where, like we talked before about pre-production units and stuff, but going into Betaflight and looking at the differences, there was huge setups and differences in things like rates and expo and stuff. And it was quite clear that Emacs were kind of, on the one that I had, were going for very gentle flying, which would suit beginner intermediate pilots. And the Mobula was definitely more for the kind of, more towards the higher end, because the Mobula 6 is just, it's ridiculous fun. It just puts a big stupid grin on your face.
Yeah, what I always like to do, Lee, when I get a quad, is I like to fly it as it came without fiddling with anything. And although you can, as you say, you can go and tune them down from a beginner point of view, especially if they're coming into beta flight cold, it's a bit intimidating to look from that. And that's why I always think Emacs do a much better job at saying you can just take this, you can fly it, and when you're used to it, you can zap it up a bit, as opposed to having to get something and bring the throttle down and bring the rates way down and all sorts until you get the sort of under control a little bit more.
The problem that I found with the Tiny Hawk and those low rates is you're talking about the first version, aren't you? But the second version is 2S capable, you see. So was the first one. It came with a 1S and a 2S battery, but if you fly it 1S indoors, don't think so. Gentle. I think it's 1S only. The first one.
I think the very first one was 1S, but there's been so many different versions. So basically, we're all kind of in agreement. Emacs make amazing stuff, and at the moment, the best is going to be your Mobula 6. The quality, in my experience with Mobula 6, is not at Emacs level, but it is more like a highly tuned sports car as opposed to a little bit of a truck, which the Emacs stuff is.
Yeah, out of the box, it's more angry, but it's difficult to put yourself into a beginner's shoes. The issue that I had with the docile rates with the Tiny Hawk is that if you've bought it and you stick 2S on it and fly it outside and it's windy, but you're stuck in angle mode, it's set to 25 degrees. So the tiniest of breeze and the thing will just fly away with the wind. That was my issue with the Tiny Hawk.
Don't fly outdoors in angle mode.
No,
I do that, Crow.
I did that. I did exactly the same thing. And the problem is, as I increased the power, try and bring it back, all it did was increase the altitude, which was not helping. Cool. Okay. And I'm just conscious we've been going for an hour. We managed to get one more thing off the list of recommendations. Thank you, everybody. There's only another 6 to go. Thank you to everyone for their time tonight. I'll start wrapping things up here. Again, support everybody, support the hobby. If you see somebody that needs some help, get involved, share your experiences, share the love. We're all in this hobby together. We've got enough people on the outside of it taking a pop. So let's not try and give them any more ammunition. Tonight for LDO 237, you have had Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
You have had Andrew/Frank.
No, mate.
And you've had Andy RC.
Ta-ta.
I just want to give a quick shout out. A couple of days ago, the 2020 lineup of the Drone is Life sponsored pilots were announced. So I want to give congratulations to MG FPV, G Crashcraft, DSMX FPV, Banded FPV, Saul FPV, Smokeout FPV, Speedsloth FPV, and our very own Aries. So
well done, guys. Congratulations. And I have been Painless 360. So as always, happy flying and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.